we would predict that Amazon's ad business will overtake that of Facebook in terms of revenue by 2020. Right, we're talking about Amazon and Facebook this week and their different fortunes, recent fortunes. Now on Media Snack, as you'll know, we don't often look back, but I do think we're quite historically correct.
Yes.
Sometimes. And so when we are, yes, it's definitely worth looking back.
Absolutely.
You may remember last year we did a couple of episodes talking about the fortunes of Facebook and also the growing Amazon advertising business. Mm-hmm. And in November last year, yes, we made a bold prediction, which was that we said Facebook had peaked, and we looked into some kind of areas of that business.
That's right. I mean, at the time, their kind of numbers, their unique numbers were beginning to dwindle slightly. Yeah. They had issues around their measurement. They were being challenged by the marketing community around their accountability. Yeah. So they had a number of headwinds that were kind of suggesting that perhaps their business model was beginning to kind of creak a little bit.
And it's a 96% ad revenue business, or maybe even more than that. So very, very susceptible to the sentiment of marketers. Yes. And we just had a sense that marketers were seeing less value, or maybe that they'd overinvested and they were kind of scaling back. That's and that was going to be potentially damaging to Facebook long term. That was only November. I mean, it was November, which is only like 7 or 8 months ago. Since November,
right, we've had Cambridge Analytica
data scandals.
Yeah.
We've had the impact of GDPR, which was kind of hypothesized and is now real.
Yeah. And Zuckerberg being dragged all over the world in front of committees.
Yeah, with some really weak Senate hearing grillings, but he's also been called in front of the UK government. He was Facebook have been grilled by the Singaporean government famously on YouTube, which was quite entertaining. And then 2 houses in the US. Yeah. So and a lot has happened, and Facebook as a business has been under scrutiny like never before. Anyway, so there's Facebook. Yes. That's the first thing. We'll put that to one side, and then we'll come back to the results that they released this week. The other thing we talked about last year was Amazon's business, which I think we'd said at the time, Amazon's advertising business was in a few hundred million. It was like a rounding error. I don't think anybody even knew that they had an advertising business. It was so tiny in the scheme of things. But we had high hopes for that.
We did. I mean, it's a phenomenal business, right? Because it's an aggregator of audiences. And audiences and consumers go there just before they're about to purchase something. And that's what advertisers are looking for. Yeah. So they've always got a fascinating business model, and we felt that the advertising part of that business model was only going to get bigger.
And would grow. And this year we expected that to grow a lot. Yeah. So both companies have reported recently their numbers.
Yes.
So what have we found?
So Facebook first. Their Q2 numbers came out, and on the back of that announcement, their share price fell by 20%. Now, that's a significant.
In one day.
In one day. In terms of its market capitalization, that meant a reduction in its value of 120 billion.
That is incredible, which is the largest ever corporate loss in terms of value in history in one day, beating Intel from I think the 1990s or something.
Now, you would assume that that's because they were posting a loss. Actually, they weren't. Yeah. The reason that there was such a dramatic reduction in its share price value is because they simply announced that they were going to be slowing down in terms of growth. Yeah. So historically, Facebook had been posting 40% increases in revenue on a quarterly basis. Their financial team said that was going to slow down to 20%. So still very healthy double-digit growth, but a significant reduction from where they were before. Yeah. Their margins were also going to be reducing from 40% to perhaps mid-30s. Yeah. So that just and they were talking about these long-term slowing of value, and that just terrified the market. And so 120 billion in one day.
Yeah. So hugely dramatic. It's probably, in our view, just an adjustment, isn't it? And this is not cyclical. We believe this is entirely structural. As we predicted in November, this is kind of the impact. Facebook was probably overinflated. The numbers seem much more reasonable. It's still a fast-growing business, but that adjustment was quite brutal, wasn't it, in one moment? And then kind of added to that, the same week, we mentioned the UK government have been quite aggressively kind of investigating social media, particularly Facebook, particularly with reference to its impact and its influence on political campaigning, decision making. And so and is it destabilizing democratic process? That's their ambition. What's called the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, their select committee published an interim report last weekend, and it is making some big demands. I mean, if this becomes policy, what they're talking about is increasing the liability of these kind of platforms like Facebook, their responsibility for the content. If you remember, like Zuckerberg has said, we're nothing to do with the content, it's not ours, we're just literally a platform, we're not a publisher. So now the UK government is suggesting you should be liable for the content. The UK government is saying that they should be far more they should be more auditable. So they should have much stronger audit rights over these companies. So they have to kind of be much more transparent. And most importantly, reclassifying these technology companies, not as publishers or platforms, but something in the middle, a new class of company which allows the governments to hold them to account in a way that they haven't before.
Because they've always tiptoed around the area. They're a tech company or they're a media company. They're never able to define what they are. Now the government is actually forcing them to make a decision.
And that likewise is going to have an impact on the valuation of Facebook because it's going to have to invest in being more like a publisher. So it's going to have to invest in monitoring content, filtering content, taking much more responsibility, measuring things better, and that's probably going to definitely impact margins, may even impact overall revenues, because we'll find out actually how effective they are or not. So not a great week for Facebook. How about Amazon?
Well, conversely, Amazon also posted their Q2 results, and they tipped the $2 billion mark in terms of advertising revenue generated in that quarter. And that was over 100% increase over the same period last year. And this is still quite nascent. Advertising is still quite a nascent kind of proposition for Amazon. And yet, it looks as though perhaps they'll hit a $10 billion advertising business this year.
At that growth rate, you'd expect them to. And it's a fringe business. It's funny, like they don't actually even split out their ad business, I think, when they report their numbers. And it was only because their CFO, I think on the earnings call for this quarter, was the first time that they'd actually even acknowledged that there was an ad business there. I think now it's a multi-billion-dollar business. So they can see the growth. I think that's what they were acknowledging. They saw it's the fastest growing part of Amazon's business. It's growing, as you said, like 100%, over 100% year on year. So we'd anticipate a $10 billion revenue business this year. No reason why that couldn't be a $20 billion business in the next year or so.
That's right. And if that's growing at that level, and they begin to invest within sort of technology, and they continue to grow their audience base, which they're going to be doing, then that is going to be a phenomenal piece of business. I think they're just starting to realize that. So those are the trends. I mean, that was the reporting that happened in this last week. Then there are the wider trends, which seems to be like this gathering anti-sentiment against companies like Facebook. I mean, Facebook particularly bearing the brunt of this. For some reason, people are not as aggressive about Google, who haven't been as tarnished, we think. But the growing public sentiment kind of against these social platforms, against use of their data. Absolutely. And you just have to see what Facebook are doing to kind of to deal with that. They've got a massive PR push. They're advertising, ironically, on print and outdoor.
Oh, really? They didn't believe in banner ads and Facebook ads, Google search.
Facebook ads. But I mean, they're having to neutralise this sort of general ill feeling around these big platforms in the way that they manage consumers' data. Quite rightly so. And so perhaps the winds of change are moving slightly against them.
And so if we just look at those numbers, I mean, one of the predictions that we made last year, to some ridicule, I mean, I definitely got a number of quite aggressive notes back, which I'm quite used to saying like, you're completely bonkers, you don't understand, like you have no idea, you guys are just making it up, a couple of clowns with a video camera, which is really true. But because we predicted that Amazon's ad business would overtake Facebook's ad business in the year 2020, so within 2 years. Lots of people said that that's just ridiculous. At the time, Facebook's ad business is a $30 billion business, near enough. Amazon had literally just started. But you can see now, we'd expect Amazon to close out as the year as a $10 billion ad business. Facebook is still maintaining something like $28 billion worth of ad revenue. But with the trends, the directions of travel, those gaps could very quickly be closed down. And some of Amazon's growth is going to be stolen from Facebook. So it's just to exacerbate the shift.
So I think that 2020 prediction is a pretty good bet. My prediction is actually it's going to happen slightly earlier.
I think that is a big. We're going to get another whole load of abuse now for that. But there you have it. I mean, the changing fortunes of how quickly things change. Thinking about just a year ago, Facebook looked unstoppable, and Amazon nobody really kind of was thinking too much about, and suddenly the tide changes. Right, good week 4.
Oh, it's been a very, very good week for Tim Cook,
yes,
the CEO of Apple.
Yeah.
Apple this week became the first American business to be valued at $1 trillion.
Yeah.
So if you'd bought shares in Apple when it floated in 1980, your share price would have increased by 50,000%.
Awesome.
And the reason that it's actually been a particularly good week for Tim Cook is because he took over the reins from Steve Jobs in 2011. In 2011, the value of Apple was 300 billion.
Yeah.
So under his stewardship and tenure, he's taken it from 300 billion to $1 trillion.
That's a lot of iPhones.
That's a lot of iPhones. Yeah. Bad week 4.
Bad week 4. Bit of a bad week for US local TV stations, which is quite specific, isn't it? But because the Department of Justice in the US, who we've said have been kind of circling a little bit around the media industry, it's been revealed in a piece in the Wall Street Journal, which we'll link to, that they have launched, I think, an official investigation because they found some funny stuff when they were looking into a company called Sinclair Broadcast as part of an acquisition in the US, and the implications or the accusations, I think, are that some of the behaviour between these companies had risk that it may have inflated the prices of TV advertising. So it's an antitrust question. Department of Justice are looking into it, but that comes at a time when there seems to be gathering rumours that the Department of Justice are going to follow up on the ANA's transparency investigation, maybe push into kind of ad fraud or ad trading in the US. A bad week for them at the moment.
Absolutely.
Right, question of the week.
Yes.
So these are the predictions that we've made. When will Amazon's ad business overtake Facebook's ad business?
2019, 2020, or never.
Excellent, good. Well, that's your media snack for this week. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel and give us a thumbs up if you like what we're doing, but that's it for now.
See you next time.